Hi, welcome back to Red City Resin. This week I'm going to try something a little bit different and walk you through all of my favorite UV resin tools to help you get started. We're going to look at lights, coloring options, all the good stuff. So if you like this video, if you like this format, let me know in the comments. If you hate it, same thing, I'd love to know. And also, if you get a chance to hit the like button, subscribe, and then send this video to one of your friends who's just now getting started in the UV resin world. Anyway, I hope you enjoy, and we'll see you on the other side. One thing that I get asked about most often is, what kind of light is the best light to use? This is something that I think a lot of people struggle with because there are so many different varieties, and there's no one correct answer. It's kind of a mix of what's the project you're going to do and what kind of resin are you using. So these are the three lights that I have in my toolbox, and I'll talk a little bit about each one. So first up, I have this one. This is a pretty common light that beginners will often start with because it tends to come in nearly every UV resin starter kit has something like this. And this is also very common with folks that do their nails. If you use gel nails or UV nail polish, this is typically what comes in the package. This light isn't bad by any means. It's actually a fairly good light, but it just depends on what you're trying to use it for. Because if you're working with something that is in a mold, or if you're working with something that's going to be kind of thick, this is not going to be your best bet. When you're looking at these lights, you really want to look for, a lot of people get hung up on what the wattage is, and the wattage doesn't really matter. What you're looking for is the nanometers. This one is at 405, and for most UV resins, you want to be somewhere between like the high 300s and in the 400s. So like most UV resins suggest between 395 and 425. These tend to sit right at about in the 360 range, 350 to 360. So they're not bad, and if you're working with just like a simple bezel, this would do just fine. But if you are going to use a mold, or if you're working with something that's going to be a little bit thicker, this won't be your best bet. Instead, you want to graduate into something a little bit bigger. Something like this. This is one of my favorite lights that I've ever found. It's by the company Resiners, and I'm not sponsored by them, but I do have an affiliate code that I'll put in the description. And this light is honestly, when I first saw it, I thought it was kind of gimmicky, but then after I got it, I bought it because I was like, well, I really want to test that out and see what difference it makes. Once I had it in my hands and started using it, it became one of my favorites, and for some reasons why you might not expect. So first and foremost, the wattage is right at the low 400s, so it's ideal for UV resin. But this is why I like it so much. It comes with an option to mount it on your wall so that it can hang like this, and then you can fold it down. Now, I very rarely use it that way, but I like that that's an option. What I typically do is I will turn it on, put my item, kind of like nestle it in here in this little gap, and then close this on top of it like a little tanning bed. I know that's kind of a weird analogy to compare it to, but it really does do an amazing job. And I also like that you can kind of stretch it out. So this is it sitting, and you can angle it at whatever angle you want, and it does this. Now change the angle of the camera here. So it does this where it spreads out, so that if you have like a large piece that you're working with, like let's say maybe you're working on like a canvas or a tray or something like that, this will make a huge difference. It's almost like a foot wide. Maybe it might even be a little bit longer than that. But this is super cool. And my absolute favorite part about it is it's rechargeable. So you can plug it in and use it plugged in, or you can unplug it and take it with you wherever you want to go. Another thing that I really like about this one is that it doesn't have an off timer like these. These little guys tend to only last for about 30 seconds. Like when you turn it on, it lasts for about 30 seconds and then it turns itself off. This doesn't do that. It will time out eventually, but for the most part, I can usually like leave it on and it doesn't turn off until I'm ready to turn it off. Now, for some people, they might not like that. I've always been very frustrated when I'm working on a piece and my timer, you know, I set it under this little guy and the timer goes off. It drives me a little bit nuts, but this is great for that reason. And then finally, this is my favorite light I've ever used. Again, I'm ignoring the watts. Watts don't really matter here, but the nanometers is what I'm concerned with. And this one's at 405. This is actually a 3D printer light for curing 3D printings, but it works just as well for resin. So I love this form factor. I really like that you can mount it if you want to, and you can adjust this to different angles. I love that it's metal because it really takes a good beating. You can see I've really loved this. I've given it lots of use over the last little while here. And my favorite thing about this is that when you turn it on, obviously it's really high powered, but it doesn't get hot unless you like leave it face down. But you can set stuff on it. So like, let's say I have a little mold, filled it with resin, and I can actually cure it from this angle, and then I can also cure it from this angle, and then I can actually set it on the table and it will sit nicely and cure that way as well. Another really fun thing about this light is that it comes with this little rotating platform. So the rotating platform has these little solar intakes here. So as long as it's getting some form of UV light, it will spin on its own, which means having something sitting on top of it, it will spin and spin and you get every single angle with no effort. So I can be working on something else while this is sitting here rotating like a little like a little ballerina in a jewelry box. But yeah, so I love this one. And honestly, of the three of these, this one was the most expensive. It wasn't even really that expensive. It was probably around $26 US. And they always have discounts. You can use my referral code to get a 10% discount. But also Amazon usually has something going on, like a coupon, things like that as well. This one was, I think, 18 and change. And then this one came as part of a kit. Actually, I think this one came as part of a nail kit, but I've bought similar kits like from Let's Resin or Jadiction for under $30, maybe between 30 and 40 if you want to get a really nice one. So a lot of those kits will come with a light that you can use. So again, it really just comes down to what your project is, the light that you have, and then also just kind of like what your preferred tactic of approach is for your project. If you want it to sort of be like a set it and forget it, these two. If you want to make sure that the timer, or if you want to have a timer that's going to keep you from like over exposing your piece, or you just, you're a little wary of letting the light shine too long, then this guy is going to be your best bet. Okay, next up, I'm going to go through some of the tools I like to use when I'm finishing a UV project, and I have a little sample here to kind of demo with. So first and foremost, when you are working with resin, especially if you're using a mold, you will sometimes get these kind of raised edges. and they're sharp, they scratch, and a lot of times you want to get rid of those because they just make your piece uncomfortable, especially if you're, making a piece of jewelry or something. The first thing I always do is trim as much excess off as I can. These are a pair of flush cutters. They're usually used for wire work. I have this specific pair that I use for resin. So once your resin is very solid and cured, you can just go around and very gently close in on the little pieces around the edge, and that will just snap right off. And it's kind of hard to see, but that just snaps right off. And it's especially helpful if your piece is kind of big. This one's really good. You just go around and trim it. Now that's still going to leave things being a little bit sharp and kind of ragged. So then you will also want to take some more steps. But if you don't have these flush cutters, and sometimes I can't find them, I have a pair of resin dedicated nail clippers. I only use these when I'm playing with resin. I do not use these on my fingernails or toenails or anywhere else. But this will do the same thing. And you just kind of go around and clip off the pieces that you don't want. The only downside to this one is if you have wrist issues like me, I have pretty bad carpal tunnel, that this makes my hand hurt so fast. So this is usually, I try to just use this whenever I'm in desperate need. This, because it kind of does a lot of the work for you and it's like a soft close piece, this does not make my hand fatigue nearly as quickly, and it's super nice to just go around snipping off, any excess of the resin that I need to until I'm happy that as much of it has been removed as I care to do. Now you can also do this particular action with like a deburring tool. I do have one, I just don't know where it's at because I use it and then I'll find it and say, oh yeah, hey, I have that. And then I'll use it once and then I'll misplace it again. And that's the story of my life. But this pair is nice and easy to find. I have a tension rod that I hang all of my tools on. So that makes this easy to locate and easy to put back in its place. Okay, so that's enough of that. We'll pretend like I cleaned that up really well. Another thing that you can do here is file. So I have a couple of different ways that I like to file my pieces. The first way, the way that I started whenever I very first started getting into resin, was to use a nail file. And the cool thing about nail files is you can get them in just about every grit. So you can go from really coarse to really fine. For example, this might be like an 80 grit on the back and then like a 200 on the front. So one is designed for taking large chunks off, and then the other one is for smoothing things out. So if I wanted to kind of come in here and really kind of saw away at this, I can use that first side to take off huge chunks like that, and then use this side to smooth it out until I get the finish that I want. Now, this is tried and true. I've seen woodworkers use these. I mean, you've got different types of nail files that you can use. These are kind of nice too because, sorry if you hate that sound, I kind of hate that sound. But those will also do a nice job of polishing. You can also like hold it and then move this piece along it like that. Oh gosh, sorry, I hate that sound. Those are options, right? You've got nail files galore. Again, if you're going to do that, do not use these on your fingers afterward. You will probably give yourself, you'll trigger an allergy or something, or you get some sort of dermatitis. Stay away from that. Use gloves when you're working with these things. But yeah, so those are two options. Now, like I said, I have some wrist problems, so I have since graduated from this into one of these guys. So this is just a standard multi-tool. You can get these in so many different price points. Like this one was, I think, like $30. This one was $60. It's a little bit more high powered. And then you can also find some on Temu for the ones that you might have to like plug in. And they're $4, $5. So, I mean, you can find one at every budget, you know, and it just depends on what you're wanting out of it and what your project is going to look like. So this particular piece here, I use almost exclusively for sanding. And I've got these little sanding discs like this, or I have these little barrel discs like that. The barrel discs come in different grades. So again, if you wanted one like this that's gonna file off large chunks really fast, that's your guy. But if you want something a little bit, you know, for more so polishing, they have those as well. And you can get like a whole big kit of them for fairly cheap. So this I use almost exclusively for sanding. It's battery powered, so there are rechargeable batteries in it. I have 3 batteries just because I use it so much. And then you can switch out the bits by holding this down, twisting, and of course it doesn't want to work now, twisting, and then taking it out and replacing it with something else. So super simple. You just twist it back until it stops moving. And then, like I said, you can get little sanding discs for it. Sometimes if I'm really wanting to get into like a little nook or cranny, I'll just use this little sanding disc by itself and wet it, and then just kind of like that. So you can do that too. If you want to see a video where I utilize this to do a project, I do have one. I'll link it above. You'll see it right here. And you can watch this in action. If you're using this with sanding resin, it's very important that you protect your lungs. Do it outside if you can, or have something in place that's going to catch all the dust, and always wear your mask. Another thing that I sometimes work with, especially maybe not necessarily on a piece like this, but if I was working with something smaller or that had curves in it, I might use something like this, which is a bead reamer. So these are designed to put into beads and then hollow out, but they make fantastic edging tools, and you can kind of really get into small spaces with it and file. You can also do that same thing with these. Now these are diamond tips for a multi-tool or a rotary tool, just like that, but this came from one that I bought on Temu, which was super cheap. Buy at your own risk. I stopped using it because it would get really hot, but you know, your mileage may vary. But these are still super handy because, again, I can just kind of get them into small spaces and use them to carve out whatever it is that I'm trying to get rid of. So these are fantastic. You get a lot of them for pretty cheap. You can buy these at any hardware store. You can also buy them on Amazon. I'll put a link down in the description below. And yeah, so there's lots of different tools that you can use. Even like around your house, there are different things that you can use as finishing tools for your pieces. Don't be afraid to do some sanding. Again, as long as you're using protection for your eyes and your lungs, it can be very safe. And especially if you're going this route, it can really speed up the process and make things very quick for you. I wanted to talk a little bit about coloring your resin. This is something that when you're brand new to resin, it's very easy to get wrong, and it's very easy to become very frustrated. So because of that, this is the thing that most people have the most questions with. So there's lots of different options when you're looking into colorants, and these aren't even all of them. You can use a lot of different things, but these are the things that I like the best. Mica powder. Mica powders are usually kind of a shiny, frosted look, lots of sparkle. And these are really great for either coating your mold or mixing into your resin. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when you're mixing things into your resin needs to undergo a chemical reaction in order to cure. So if you have too many things inside of your resin that is messing with that chemical reaction or causing an overwhelming mixture of different components, that made absolutely no sense. Basically, if you mix too many things into your resin, it can stop it from curing completely or at all. So you have to be kind of careful about, your ratios. A great way to use a mica powder specifically is to take your mold, and this isn't a mold, this is a little cup, but basically you would take your mica and then you would dust all around the inside of your mold and then pour your resin into it, and it's going to take that color and kind of bind with it into your piece. So that's one option. You can also mix it in. I've done several videos where I've used mica powder as the source of color for my resin. So that's an option. Along that same line, I love these. I'm absolutely obsessed with these nail chrome powders. Not only do they make awesome nail designs like that, but you can also use them on your resin pieces. There's a few different ways you can do that. You can do the same thing, brush the inside of your mold. You can also mix it into the resin, but another thing that you can do is if your resin is freshly cured and it still has like a tiny bit of tackiness, you can brush it directly onto the resin and create a nice chrome effect. So that's a lot of fun. It takes some getting used to, but it is, a fun piece. The only thing I don't like about this is when they sell them in these little tiny bits like this, these little pans, and you just don't get very much of them. So if you find a color you really like, go out and try to find like a big batch of it. Next up, and these are two things that often get people in trouble when they first start using resin: dyes or pigments and alcohol ink. Now, these are two different things. So this is a pigment. It's going to be pretty thick. It's going to be thicker. It's going to not spread when you put it into resin. And it is going to, again, you have to be careful with how you use it because it can upset the chemical compound of your resin and make it so that your resin doesn't fully cure. This will do that same thing if you use too much of it, but this is alcohol based, so it's more transparent, and when you drop it into your resin, it's going to kind of bloom, and it's going to create that imbalance in your resin. So because of that, you will want to make sure that you put down a layer of clear, then your colored layer, and then another layer of clear, and sandwich them between each other. That way the alcohol ink doesn't cure strangely, because it will. So you have to be kind of careful with that. And I'll do a little on-screen demonstration here in just a little bit. Finally, acrylic paint pens like this or a Posca marker make an excellent after curing thing to add some color. You have a lot of control over how you're using it. So I like to use these when I'm edging pieces like that, or writing someone's name on something. If you have really nice handwriting, you can get away with using something like this instead of breaking out your Cricut. So, those are different options for how you can approach adding color to your piece. Again, this isn't all of the methods. These are just some of my favorite methods. Okay, so on this side I used some pigment, on this side I used the alcohol ink, and you can really see the difference in how this one reacts. The alcohol really allows like a blooming effect to happen, where this kind of, it stays put, it starts to travel a little bit, but it's a lot better for kind of like making swirly designs with, and you have a little bit more control over it, whereas the alcohol ink is just going to kind of do what it wants to do. Now, this is why I say you should sandwich it between 2 layers of clear. If you look at this, see how it finished? It almost even looks like scorched over here. And over here you got those ripples. Obviously, that's not a great look. It's probably even still tacky. I'm not going to touch it because I don't want to ruin it, but you're probably looking at something that's slightly under cured, and that's okay because I'm going to put another layer of clear on top of it to sandwich this in between those 2 clear layers. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm done curing. Now I can feel this and tell that it's still warm. Because of that, I'm not going to touch it yet. If your UV resin is still warm, still even hot at this stage, if you touch it, it's going to take on all of your fingerprints. It's going to feel very tacky and sticky. You have to let it cool down. So we're going to give it a chance to cool down here. Okay, she's cured now. So you can see that weird ripply effect that was on there before whenever we first cured the pigmented part has been corrected, and the color is nice and safe. This isn't a particularly exciting piece, but you can kind of see the difference in what a pigment might do versus what an alcohol ink might do. Which of these color ideas do you prefer? Tell me about it in the comments. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, be sure to subscribe. Stay rad, and I'll see you again next week. For more resin tutorials, check out my resin tutorial playlist.